Since Herb Jones returned from injury, the Pelicans starters have been lighting it up. But just how good are they? I've got the numbers to put it in context, plus a big surprise about why it's working. It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Wednesday, a game day for your New Orleans Pelicans as they take on the Sacramento Kings. Second straight game against them. I love these little mini series, but they do. Should be a fun one tonight in the Smoothie King Center. But we're going to talk about the starting lineup, which has just been lighting it up over the past 4 games or so since Herb Jones returned from injury. The numbers are shockingly good. I want to put them in larger context around the league to tell you how good this unit has been, but also there's a couple of surprising stats with that. And Herb Jones also leads the way in this. I want to look at Dyson Daniels' injury updates. We've got a lot to get to in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one Pelicans podcast. Support the channel by becoming an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday. If you listen one day a week, try listening too. This is a fun Pelicans team right now, especially with the stats that I'm about to give you for all of this. Also, we will have a show every day this week, even with Thanksgiving and everything. So let's get to it. Let's get into this one because the numbers, well, they tell a story and they're eye-opening here. There's no doubt that since that second Mavericks game, the Pelicans starters have been good and the Pelicans have looked like a different team. If you look at the past 4 games, they've played the Mavs, the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, and the Kings, and they have won 2 of those by blowing out the opponent. They lost a close one against the Timberwolves, and then they also beat and hung on against the Denver Nuggets. They're 3-1 in that stretch, and those are the top 4 teams in the very tough Western Conference. Some things are working well. And I wanted to look at the starting lineup because on the surface of it, it looks a little bit unorthodox. You're essentially running Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Jonas Valanciunas. There's no shooting in that lineup whatsoever. You have 2 defenders, your 2 scorers, and then a center in Valanciunas. How good has that lineup been? Because the eye test says they've been really good. They were really good, and this is going to skew these numbers a little bit, against the Sacramento Kings. They've only played 86 possessions per cleaning the glass together, so there's a very small sample size here. It's not enough to actually give us a percentile of where they would rank, but the percentile on basically every stat here with this team, I'm going to give you a spoiler, would be number 1. This lineup's good. They have a net rating of plus 44.3. A championship level team is plus 6. 44.3. By context, if you take Dyson Daniels out, subbing CJ McCollum, and we'll talk about this, there's negative 16.1. They have figured some things out, and this lineup is working. They have an offensive rating of 151.2. That would basically be best in the league out of all lineups that qualify. So 100 possessions or more. They're not far off that number. The best one right now is the Clippers with 132.7. They're at 151.2. They have an field goal percentage. The best in the league is that Clippers team, 65.8. Their field goal percentage, so factoring in that 3s are worth more than 2s, essentially here. Hold on, I got to pull the data back up. 76.9. They turn the ball over less than 10% of the time. The average is 14.4 league-wide. With lineups that count. They grab an absurd 1 out of every 3 misses on the offensive glass. The one thing they don't do offensively is get to the free throw line, which is a little bit surprising. Their defense is also good. A defensive rating of 106.9. Now, I will say, this kind of shocked me because that's not an elite number. That would put them right around the middle of the pack in terms of some of the best starting lineups kind of out there. Still good, but when you put them in context of, say, teams and things like that, well, it doesn't look exactly like what you would be expecting, but it's good. It's up there in terms of teams, not in terms of very specific lineups. So say they're a well above average defensive team when they're out there on the court, but not elite. They turn people over 17.2% of the time. The average with these numbers, 14.4. So they're doing more of that. They're getting out. They're running. It's all of these things, and they look good. They've been really fun to watch, and they're doing this with no shooting. So I wanted to really dive in to see where are they getting this done, because a team like that, a lineup like this with no shooting really shouldn't be working. So what's kind of changed? What's making them really efficient? And this is where some stats are going to surprise you a little bit. So we put in the larger context, they are really freaking good, aren't they, right now? But no shooting. Well, they're upping their attempts at the rim. With that lineup, 45.2% of their shot attempts are at the rim. This team averages 31.2. The lineup with CJ McCollum in instead of Dyson Daniels is 29.4. So they're essentially 15%, taking 15% more shots at the rim than they were before. That's big. They're cutting down on some of those mid-range attempts that they've had. Those short mid-range attempts is well below, 10% below what that normal starting lineup is doing. The problem here is still they don't take three-pointers. This group has actually not taken one single corner three-point attempt. That's not good. But they're getting to the rim, and it's letting them be more efficient. So let me ask you this question, and we'll go into the next segment with this. If I'm telling you they're taking, let's round up, make the numbers easier, 50% of their shot attempts at the rim, what do you think they're doing? What do you think they're doing with Herb Jones and Dyson Daniels in there? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking they're turning people over, then they're getting out and running and just scoring at the rim that way in transition. Actually, no. And that's what makes this so exciting. They're doing so much of this work in the half court. And that genuinely surprised me more so than any other stat with this. Let's break down why and how, and then look at also Herb Jones too, coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I want to talk to you about eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd, the GOAT, to bring you some of the best fantasy pickups each week, all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. Let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. First one is Kyle Anderson. With Jaden McDaniels out for a week, Anderson should see a boost in his production to help fantasy managers. You also have Eric Gordon. We love him here in New Orleans, but what can you do? If you need a player, well, Bradley Beal is remaining out, and Gordon has been starting and putting up solid enough fantasy numbers. Also, maybe consider Alex Caruso. He's inserted into the lineup. He's an appealing fantasy option until he inevitably gets hurt. So Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same for your vehicle. I work on all of my cars. I like to keep them running and on the road. You use them to get to work, to have a social life, for whatever it is that you need. And if your car's not running, eBay Motors is here to help, and they're going to do it because you don't want to be ordering extra parts. You get a part, it should fit your car, fit your vehicle, and get you on the road and going. That's where I use them for everything, for all of my cars. 1976 Corvette, the current Jeep that I have too. And with over 122 million parts for your ride, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever it needs. You want to make it look cooler, sound cooler, or just fix a part? eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Don't need to see if it fits, then order another part. At these prices as well, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive over at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the Number One Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Become an everyday or support the show by listening Monday through Friday. And now for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows. I'm on Locked On NBA every Wednesday today. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe for the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Also, this Saturday, Pels 12 watch party at Mid-City Yacht Club against the Utah Jazz. I will be there. It's a Friendsgiving. Let's all hang out, get the gang together. Come say hi, come support the local fans. So let's keep talking about the Pelicans starting lineup here, because when you dive into the current starting lineup, because we have the question around CJ McCollum, and we're probably going to have to actually push some of the stuff with the show here because going a little long on certain things. So they're good. Like, it's really as simple as that. Like, they are freaking good. But they're doing it in ways that are a little bit unexpected. I thought this team would be running in transition a ton. Herb Jones has been out there blocking everything, getting steals. Zion's getting steals. Dyson Daniels is getting steals. And they definitely are getting steals. But it's not as much in transition as you think. The Pelicans this season are averaging playing in transition 14.6% of the time. Dyson Daniels, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Jonas Valanciunas are only getting in transition a total of 12.8% of the time. That's compared to 18% for that lineup that features CJ McCollum in there for Dyson Daniels, your expected opening night starting five. They're running about 5% less or so. That's a little shocking to me. You would think that they would be getting out and running and just crushing it, and they're not. They're getting so many steals, but under 60% of those are turning into transition opportunities. This is genuinely shocking to me, because the average in the league is 65.1% of turning a steal into a transition opportunity. So they are kind of below average in terms of frequency when it comes to transition. However, their efficiency in transition is like sky high. Sky high. Their offensive rating in transition is 190. The average for the league is 126.3. The 190 would be the best easily out of all the lineups that I'm looking at here with all the teams on cleaningtheglass.com. They're hyper efficient. They score more or less every single time they are in transition. It's a truly incredible number. So while they're running less, they're actually turning those opportunities and scoring at a higher efficient rate. So they're outdoing other lineups that get out in transition more in terms of points per possession. They're making the most of these opportunities, essentially. Imagine if they start getting more transition opportunities at the rate that they're scoring now. They'd be one of the most fearsome teams in the league. They like to get out, and if they get a chance to run, they're going to score. But it also then means that the half court is really good. And that's something that hasn't really been the case for the New Orleans Pelicans at all. Right now in the half court, they have an offensive rating, the starting lineup, of 140.8. This is the number that is shocking. 140.8. League average in terms of the lineups that I'm looking at is 96.6. The best one in the league, that Clippers lineup of Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Robert Covington, and Zubac, which isn't there anymore. Let's look at Boston's. Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, right? That lineup's still there. It exists. 112.1. Now they have almost like 4 times as many possessions as the Pelicans do, but 140.8. It's a 28 point per 100 possession difference. That's an insane number. They're scoring just at an incredible rate in the half court. And it isn't even on putbacks and offensive boards. They're just really good in the half court right now. And it comes down to this. Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram are playing well. Remember when, if you're an everydayer, Will Guillory was on the show 2 weeks ago. We'll get him on next week. I don't want to bug him during Thanksgiving this week. That he said these two just need to play better. And when they do, they'll figure it out and they're going to be good. Well, these two are playing better now. Zion was a little slow to start the season. You just saw him put up 18 points in the second quarter against the Sacramento Kings. Then in the third, Brandon Ingram, also 18 points in that quarter. Second time that's happened for teammates in New Orleans to score 18 plus in a quarter each. They're just playing better. These guys have figured out. Zion Williamson said after the game the other night, that they had a team meeting, that they needed to just kind of get on the same page. They weren't before, they are now, and kind of talk about everything that it is they're trying to do. And now that they've done that, well, look at them. They're taking off. They're looking amazing. Sometimes it's as simple as guys just need to figure some things out. So all the panicking from earlier on in the season does look at least a little bit silly right now. It's basically just Brandon Ingram and Zion have elevated their level of play, and they're working with each other a little bit more and a little bit better. You can see the chemistry out there. You see them having a little bit more fun and doing their thing. The fact, I entirely thought it was going to basically be based off of Herb Jones forcing steals, Dyson Daniels forcing steals, this team getting out in transition and running, because they've been doing that and they're hyper efficient in transition. But yeah, you're right. The half court has been really kind to this team because your two stars are playing like stars. The problem is there are ways to shut them down. We're going to change up. I know I've got the rundown on the show here, but I want to change that today. And we'll talk more about Herb Jones and Dyson Daniels a little bit later, because as I'm doing this, and I maybe should have planned this a little bit better, but sometimes these thoughts just come up in the moment. We got to roll with them because I think it's relevant to this topic. That I want to look at where CJ fits into this. You still need more shooting. That's going to be really important here, I think. And it actually goes to something that Mike Brown of the Kings said. So maybe we'll get this theory tested tonight as the Pelicans take on the Sacramento Kings. So we're going to look at that coming up next. But this lineup is good. And the fact that the half court is working so well, this is where sometimes you just don't need to overthink it, right? Get Zion in a little bit of space, get him moving, which is what they did against the Sacramento Kings. I talked about it in the recap show if you're an everydayer. It was a lot of dribble handoffs from Jonas Valanciunas, giving Zion a little bit of space. Jonas basically clearing out a body more or less, and then Zion getting downhill and attacking and basically knifing right through the heart of that defense for an easy layup because he's so good at that. Brandon Ingram shooting threes. More of those, please. He even says and has acknowledged that he needs to do more of that, then he'll be scary, right? All of those things are starting to happen. And when you get that with defenders who are making life difficult for guys like De'Aaron Fox, here's the Herb Jones appreciation, right? Him and Dyson Daniels just basically making life hell for De'Aaron Fox and others. Herb Jones playing on bigs, allowing them to switch a little bit more and playing some of these small ball lineups. Everything's just kind of starting to click a little bit for the Pelicans, and it's a big part of why you're seeing them so competitive against so many of these top teams in the Western Conference right now. This was a gauntlet. Look, when they lost 5 straight games, and you still had one against the Mavs, right? The Nuggets, the Timberwolves, then 2 against the Kings, 5 more games. Maybe it's just PTSD from the past, but didn't it seem like this losing streak could hit 10? Because we've been there before. And they completely turned it around. Even if they lose this game tonight to go 3-2 against the top 4 teams in the West, without Zion in one of those games that they would have won, you would assume if he had played, without CJ McCollum, without Trey Murphy, when things start to click when they're healthy, oh yeah, this team, again, is going to be really scary and be a big threat in the Western Conference. And this is why I've been saying, if you're an everydayer for like a week or two, I'm really optimistic about this team and feeling really good about the progression of this team this season. Let's talk about CJ McCollum shooting, all of that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Score early this NBA season, this NFL season with FanDuel, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. If you bet on the Pelicans to win against the Sacramento Kings tonight, and they do, you're going to win that bet, and you're going to get $150. If your team wins, you get $150 in bonus bets. That's great. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. I love that the app is super easy to use. It's optimized for mobile. You can find the bets that you want, the spreads, the player props, the over-unders. I enjoy the same game parlays. Zion to score more than 22.5 points and the Pelicans to win. Or Brandon Ingram to hit 3 or more threes and the Pelicans to win. Any of those are a lot of fun to put together, get a bigger payout. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and tip off the NBA season, kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one Pelicans podcast. Make us your first listen. You want to be doing that, of course. And support the channel by becoming an everyday or listen Monday through Friday. No one else comes to y'all like this, breaking down the stats, the X's and O's behind what's working, hopefully giving you a little bit more insight to why this team is firing on all cylinders, it feels like right now. If you want to support the channel, comment down below. If you're an everydayer, tell me. We also have the Locked On Pelicans Insiders group. If you want to text me, you can do it through that. The link is in the description down below. So let's keep going. I know I've kind of skipped the rundown on today's show here, but as we're kind of doing this and I'm formulating it in my head, this all I think flows a little bit better here. So this lineup's working. We've established that. What do you do with CJ McCollum? He said he's going through practice and he's ready to return almost any day now. They'll warm him up a little bit more, but do you insert him into the starting lineup? Do you take out Dyson Daniels? You know, when this lineup is significantly outperforming the starting lineup that we expected the season to have, they've played about the same amount of possessions. One has a net rating of 44.3, one has negative 16.1. How do you kind of reconcile all of that? So here's where I'm going to go in a different direction than what you might be thinking. You still start CJ McCollum and you do start him over Dyson Daniels. And it goes back to something I just said in the last segment. Did you pick up on it? Why is this lineup working? It's working because Zion's playing super well and Brandon Ingram's playing super well and they're coexisting together. The defense isn't insanely elite. It's good. It's not insanely elite. So you're still going to have a good enough defense, I think. You need to be able to score, and that's been kind of the Pelicans' problem. So if these two are playing well, put more shooting around them. That's CJ McCollum. I told you, they haven't taken one corner three. That ain't going to get it done in the NBA in 2023 going into 2024. You need to have shooters out there. You know, Mike Brown said they were supposed to be double teaming Mike Brown, the Sacramento Kings head coach. And we'll see if this is what they do in this game tonight. And I'm sure they're going to try a whole lot more. See, we tied it into a game preview. This has all worked out well of the flow of the show now. Mike Brown said they were supposed to be doubling Zion more and they just didn't do it. They weren't able to do it. Part of it was how the Pelicans were using him, getting him moving and in some space. And if you do that, good luck double teaming him because he's too fast, he's too quick, and his touch around the rim is incredible. But if you do manage to double him and limit him and slow him down, is Dyson Daniels going to make you pay from three or by scoring? Probably not. Will Herb Jones? Actually, Herb might. He had 18 points in that game. But if you can slow down one of Zion or Brandon Ingram, this lineup could fall apart. So it does make sense to have CJ McCollum out there. If Zion struggles in this game and the Pelicans lose, it does justify that. And as I've said, there is some small sample size theater and craziness going on with this, that they've only played 86 possessions together. One game can definitely change that plus 44.3. They've had two blowout wins, you know, and not a blowout loss, which is going to happen. We saw that happen, you know, the game before to the Mavs, not this lineup though. So when you look at it like that, it does say that while this lineup is good, it's being anchored by Zion. It's being anchored by BI. So make sure that they're able to play their best, and that is more shooting around him. It's not CJ McCollum being the sixth man off the bench. They use him as a sixth man off the bench, while also with the starters. Get the best of both worlds. We know the defense can be good. Herb is also playing at an amazing level right now and can kind of anchor that defense. Dyson Daniels can be your first sub in, and I think he definitely will be, that if they put CJ McCollum back into the starting lineup, the first guy you're going to see off the bench is going to be Dyson Daniels, at least until Trey Murphy comes back, and even then, until Trey is fully in game shape. There's a lot to like here about what they're doing, but it could fall apart pretty easily with the right defensive scheme and teams just trying to say, okay, Dyson Daniels, go and beat us. I'm going to ask you this. You have two options. You're an opposing coach. Two players are in front of you. One is CJ McCollum. One is Dyson Daniels. Which one are you going to dare to beat you to win the game? You're not going to test CJ with that option. You're going to test Dyson Daniels. That tells you which guy should be in the starting lineup for this team. It still should be CJ McCollum. They need to shoot threes more to space the court for their two best players, because we've seen when that doesn't happen, they can struggle. They are playing at a better level. There's a lot more chemistry between the two of them right now. They are getting stops and being able to get out and run and are hyper efficient. Dyson Daniels is good in transition. But if you still do that, and they should be able to because they're not running as much as we thought in transition, make your half court even better and take a little bit of the pressure off of Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. I told you the stats were surprising. This is how you're supposed to kind of reconcile the eye test with the stats and everything. And that's why both sides of this are really important when it comes to evaluating this team, trying to make sense of what we're seeing out there on the court. So I don't know. This has been fun though, isn't it? I'm really curious to see what adjustments get made in this game tonight. They're going to try and double Zion more. I promise you that. Counter to that is going to be shooting, I think. Or if they run a bunch of zone, which they actually tried to do against the Pelicans, and I'm going to be curious to see if the Kings do that again in this game as well. Because the Pelicans beat that with a lot of backdoor cuts when shooting is usually how you're supposed to beat a zone defense. So if zone ends up being something that can stop the Pelicans, you are going to need more shooting out there on the court. That's CJ McCollum. We'll see, though. We'll see. This is why I don't do game previews. You can kind of talk about all this and none of it may happen in the game at all. And it kind of just renders the show a little bit moot. But when you have these kind of two back-to-back games and you actually are able to make a few adjustments, not a ton, but a few, expect to see Zion double team more. Does that slow down the Pelicans' half-court offense? They'll be good in transition, certainly, but you still need to be able to score in the half court. The Pelicans have been doing an amazing job of that. They're going to need to keep it up too. Let's see what they do tonight in this game. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Become an everyday or listen Monday through Friday. Support the channel that way. Comment down below on YouTube. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to recap the game.